Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the public debriefing on the outcomes of BEREC's 66th Ordinary Plenary Meeting, held last Thursday on 12th March. This was the first of 4 plenary meetings scheduled for 2026 and the only one held virtually. The remaining 3 plenaries will take place in person in June, in October, and in December. We will continue to organize similar debriefing sessions after each plenary. Note, please, that the June and October public debriefings will be held in person at the IRG offices in Brussels. Further details on all upcoming sessions will be published on BEREC's website well in advance. Next slide, please. On this slide, you can see the running order for today's session. In total, we will cover 6 key topics, and the session is structured into the 2 parts. After the first 2 items, we will have a Q&A session, and then the second Q&A is at the very end. If you would like to ask a question, please use the live chat box next to the live stream via Slido. We will collect your questions and address them during the dedicated Q&A session. Let me briefly walk through today's agenda. First, my successor as a BEREC Chair, Alejandra de Iturriaga Gandini from CNMC in Spain, will present the call for input for next year's work program. After that, I will hand over to the co-chairs of BEREC International Roaming Working Group, Elizabeth Felber from RTR Austria and Ioana Hudalaki from EET Greece. They will present the draft BEREC Retail Roaming Guidelines and the draft Wholesale Roaming Guidelines, both of which have been approved for public consultation. After their presentation, we will take out first Q&A session, focusing on these initial topics. We will then move to the second part of the session. I will hand over to the co-chairs of the Planning and Future Trends Working Group, Maria Luis Merida from CNMC Spain and Katia Marcantonio from Agicom Italy, who will present the draft report on virtual wards and WEB 4.0. Next, the co-chairs of Market and Economic Analysis Working Group, Julia Zaim Grigore from ANCOM Romania and Jordi Canadel Boix from CNMC Spain will present the draft BEREC fact-finding report on connectivity, competition, and regulatory developments across different jurisdictions. They will be followed by the co-chairs of the Digital Market Working Group, Chiara Caccinelli from ARCEP France, and Margarida Melo Santos from ANACOM Portugal, who will present BEREC's response to the European Commission's consultation on the digital fitness check and digital omnibus. Finally, I will provide a short update on general activities and upcoming events before we conclude with a final Q&A session. With that, I'm pleased to hand over to Alejandra to present the process for developing BEREC's work program for 2027. Alejandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marko. Thank you everyone for following this public debriefing. So, next slide, please. Okay, following the mandate established in Article 21 of the BEREC regulation, the Board of Regulators adopted the outline of the BEREC work program for 2027 on January 28 this year. Subsequently, and in accordance with the procedure established in the same article, BEREC initiated consultations with the Council, the Parliament, and the European Commission by formally submitting the document to the European institutions. The goal is for the BEREC work program for 2027 to be adopted no later than December 31st of this year. Next slide, please. So BEREC will define its work streams taking into account the high-level strategic priorities set for the period 2026-2030 in the last BEREC strategy adopted and published in December last year. So those include, first of all, promoting full connectivity and the digital single market. Second priority of the BEREC strategy, supporting open and competition-driven digital ecosystems. And third one, empowering end users. The fourth is contributing to sustainable, secure, and resilient digital infrastructures. And the fifth one is strengthening BEREC's capabilities and continuous improvement. Next slide, please. So, as every year, we approach the collaboration of the work program as a collaborative project. That's why on February 27th, we launched an early call for inputs, inviting all stakeholders and interested parties to submit project proposals. All information is available in BEREC's website. And this call will remain open until April 15th, end of business. We are very interested in hearing from you and learning about your proposals. I encourage all those interested in participating to do so before that date, April the 15th. So the project proposal will be evaluated, taking into account their contribution to the BEREC 5 priorities that I mentioned before. As a novelty this year, an Excel template has been created to help you submit proposals. This template will be also very useful for us to organize all the proposals received. So we'd like to kindly ask you to use this template. The document should be sent by email to the address shown on the slide and also our website before the deadline, April 15th. If possible, we would greatly appreciate if proposals were submitted in English. Next slide, please. And in conclusion, what are the next steps? As I mentioned before, the call for inputs is already open and will end next April 15th. Next Tuesday, March 31, we will present in Brussels the outline of the 2027 work program during our signature event, the Stakeholder Forum. I encourage you to attend either in person or online, and this is a great opportunity to engage directly with BEREC. In the morning of the Stakeholder Forum, the meet and greet sessions with working groups, co-chairs are being organized. These meetings are useful not only to get to know better what BEREC is doing, but also to discuss possible future work streams with the co-chairs. After the closing of the call for inputs, we will work internally to produce a draft proposal in October 2026 that will be also subject to public consultation. That is, you will have a new opportunity in October to have your say, this time on the draft. Our final deadline set in the BEREC regulation is to adopt and publish our 2027 work program in December so that all the activities can start being implemented from January 2027. And that's all from me, Marko. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alejandra. I'm sure we will come back to you on the Q&A session. Now, Elizabeth, Joanna, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marko. We will now present the update of the roaming guidelines. As you all know, since 1st of January 2026, Roam Like at Home has been expanded to also cover Ukraine and Moldova. Since the last semester of 2025, we have been discussing with NRAs and within BEREC various questions that have been raised about this expansion, and we realized that the update of the guidelines in this regard will support operators and NRAs in the harmonized implementation of this expansion. Therefore, we took the decision to work on it in the first semester of 2026. Can we move to the next slide, please? As mentioned, this was our motivation was this geographical extension, and our documents are based on the specific decisions that were taken in accordance with the association agreements between the European Union and Ukraine and the European Union and Moldova. Can we move to the next slide, please? One very important aspect of this expansion is what is covered by this geographical extension of Rome Like at Home. What is the Rome Like at Home applicability? And this is an aspect that our guidelines try to clarify. As you can see from this table, that is also part of the guidelines, there are some scenarios in which Rome Like at Home does not apply. In particular, although for EU countries, Rome Like at Home applies in all scenarios, this Rome Like at Home regime is not applicable between Ukraine and Moldova, between Ukraine and the 3 EA countries, and between Moldova and the 3 EA countries. Let me now hand over to Elizabeth to continue with the presentation.
Thank you, Joanna. Next slide, please. This is now an overview which part of the guidelines had to be changed because of the integration of Ukraine and Moldova and for Rome Like at Home. First of all, it's a part about prices. So it clarifies that Rome Like at Home now is also applicable when roaming in the Ukraine or when roaming in Moldova. And at the same time, also the wholesale rates apply to operators in the two countries, between EU operators and the operators in the two countries and vice versa. Furthermore, also the fair use policy parts in the retail guidelines have been updated and make clear that this also applies to the two new countries. As well, the transparency provisions had to be updated. Now for Ukraine and Moldova, it's also necessary to provide all the information that used to be sent only when roaming in the EU, also when roaming in either Ukraine or Moldova. With regard to the section on exchange rates, these now also include the exchange rates applicable for Moldova and Ukraine and the respective publication in their official journals. With regard to the section on value-added services and emergency services, also these sections have been updated as operators also need to inform about the relevant services when roaming in the two countries. And also the relevant BEREC databases have been updated already. They are published on the BEREC website and are now already including information about value-added services and emergency services in Ukraine and Moldova. Finally, also the section on sustainability applications had to be updated as the sustainability now also depends when roaming in Ukraine and Moldova. Something that is not part of the guidelines but also has an effect is the data collection that we're conducting every year. We need to update the data collection template to also take into account the two new countries. The roaming working group is currently working on the updates of the template, and we envisage to have a draft ready in Q2, and we will consult them with operators so that they're ready for the next data collection that will be launched in September this year. Next slide, please. So what are the next steps? The publication of the guidelines will end on the 17th of April 2026. You can find on the BEREC website both the clean version and the track changes documents, which will provide you some help to identify the changes that have made in the guidelines. We will then plan to finalize the guidelines and adopt them for plenary 2, which is due in June this year. And as I already mentioned, the new data collection templates will be shared with operators for their comments in the second quarter this year, so that they can be finalized for the next data collection in September. This was it from our side. I hand now over to Marko for the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Joanna. We have now reached our first Q&A session. I would like to invite all participants to submit their questions via the chat, and we will do our best to address them. We have already received 2 questions in advance related to BEREC's future plans. Let me start with the first one. And because it's related to the future plans, I would like to invite Alejandra to respond. So the question is, how do you plan to approach 6G from a regulatory point of view? Alejandra, please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. The 6G is still in a standardization stage, and deployments are expected mainly from 2030. As regulators, we are always cautious in relation to emerging technologies. This, however, does not mean that we are not monitoring 6G developments. On the contrary, in the last years, BEREC has been analyzing some of the key building blocks related to 6G. For example, 6G is expected to be AI native, and BEREC published different reports. In 2023, a report on the impact of artificial intelligence solutions in the telecommunications sector on regulation. In 2024, BEREC also published a high-level position on artificial intelligence on virtual worlds. And this year, we are preparing a report on the competition dynamics of artificial intelligence and its impact on internet openness and end users. Other pillar related to 6G is, as you know, ubiquitous connectivity, pointing to the role of non-terrestrial networks to complement existing terrestrial mobile networks. In this regard, BEREC has been organizing a number of workshops on satellite connectivity and direct-to-device services, and plans to continue support capacity building through expert dialogue on these topics during 2026. The report on virtual worlds that is presented today for public consultation also touches on the diverse elements related to 6G, including immersive technologies, sensing networks, or the integration of connectivity with computing services and data services. So 6G propositions entail a special focus as well as on sustainability, security, and resilience. Those are matters that are among BEREC priorities, and we have 2 dedicated working groups on this. And 6 developments are also part of the BEREC strategy, and further work is expected in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandra. Let's move to the second question. We got it up front. So, is BEREC planning to produce any report on the state of deployment of IPv6 in the European telecom sector? This is also related to our future work. So, Alejandra, once again, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marko. Well, BEREC acknowledges the importance of Internet Protocol version 6 for the future evolution of Internet and its role as an essential precondition for a digital Europe. For this reason, in 2021, we organized a workshop dedicated exclusively to this topic. During the workshop, we discussed IP version 6 deployment across Europe, involving several key European stakeholders. The objective of the workshop was to share good practices on the actions taken to facilitate IP version 6 deployment and to debate on how different actors can be encouraged to deploy it. As now, immediate additional work on IP version has not been planned for 2026 BEREC work program. If stakeholders believe that there is any activity related to this topic where BEREC could develop useful and relevant work, we could include it in the 2027 work program. So we encourage stakeholders to make any proposal regarding this matter in the early call for inputs that we have opened and which will close on April 15th. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandra, for your thoughtful answers. Let me quickly check to the chat if we have any additional live questions. I think we have it. So we have just received a question in chat. Let me read it. So it is, your table shows that the regime is introducing complexity for operators and consumers. With a proposal to expand the rules to the 6 Western Balkan economies, would you need to update the guidelines every time that a new country is added to the ERLAC, so Rome like at home regime? I think the Rome co-chairs would you like to reply to this? Elizabeth, Joanna, please.
Of course, we can take this question. And indeed, the answer is yes. If more countries are included in the Rome like at home expansion, geographical expansion, then the guidelines need to be updated. However, as BEREC, we try to facilitate the feedback that we will get from the operators by providing also track changes versions of the guidelines in order to help them focus on particular chapters, because what we have updated is really relevant to this expansion. So they don't need to see again all parts, because most of the parts remain the same as in 2022. In addition, for Western Balkans, according to what we hear, it seems that they will join, if they join, this extension will be as a group of countries, not one by one. So that would mean that if all these economies join together, only one update will be needed. Thank you.
Joanna, thank you very much. I will check the chat again. I don't think so there is anything for this part. So we will now continue with the draft BEREC report on the virtual awards and Web 4.0. Maria and Katja, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marco, and good afternoon, everyone. It is our pleasure to present today for public consultation the draft report on virtual awards and Web 4. This consultation is already open until April 20, and although the document focuses on the implications for the electronic communication sectors, what are the connectivity requirements for the services, the opportunities and challenges for the operators, or some potential sectoral regulatory considerations. The first 2 chapters provide a general context by providing the definitions of virtual awards and Web 0. So please, can I have the next slide? Thank you. Those definitions are taken from the Commission recommendation issued in 2023 and define the virtual awards as services that are persistent, immersive 3D real-time digital environments. And these virtual worlds are meant to be one of the key building blocks for the broader concept of Web 4, that is meant to be the next generation, the 4th generation of Internet. And is using advanced technologies, including AI, IoTs, extended reality, blockchains, and also, as said, virtual worlds, with aim to blending the physical and digital worlds. The academia has also defined quite consistently some key defining characteristics of virtual worlds that include immersivity, meaning that the user is inside the digital environment, synchronicity, meaning that there are real-time interactions, persistence, that the environment evolves even when the user is not connected, unity, with this objective of interoperability of the different virtual worlds, and also it implies a massive content creation. While I say that we develop more in depth in the issues related to connectivity in the report, we acknowledge in this first contextual part that there are some general challenges related to the development of these services in relation, for instance, of interoperability, environmental sustainability, end users' rights, and governance and jurisdiction matters. And finally, to complete this general picture and concrete the type of services we are referring to, we describe a number of representative use cases. that include, like, for example, urban and industrial digital twins, immersive collaboration solutions, telemedicine, among others. What all these cases have in common is that they rely on very high performance connectivity. So please, next slide. To assess these implications for connectivity, we ask ourselves 3 questions. First, what are the network requirements required for the provision of virtual worlds and Web4? How can the current state of the art networks cope with those requirements? And what are the network developments currently in the pipeline that could contribute to the delivery of these services? So the outcome of this research saw that although there is not a single performance threshold as use cases related to these concepts can be very different. For example, the requirements for digital twins are different to the ones that relate to the more futuristic holographic communications. So although the thresholds are different, there is a general consensus that stricter requirements that the networks can provide today are needed. And also that additional digital infrastructures, for example, edge nodes that cope with latency challenges will be required as well. So against this backdrop, we also address network developments to deliver Web4 and virtual worlds. And in general, we take note that there is a number of electronic communication network standardization initiatives in relation to Wi-Fi 7 and 8, fixed network, 6G, that are explicitly aiming to contribute to the delivery of these services. And common to those, there are also additional propositions that are meant to play a role in developing Web4 and virtual worlds. And we developed in the report in relation to the concept of the 3C networks, this tightly integrated computing, caching, and communication systems, and also developments around the integrated sensing and communications. And in addition, we take note to that additional developments that we have addressed more in depth in previous BEREC reports, like virtualization and cloudification and the integration between AI and electronic communication networks and services. Now I give the floor to my colleague Katia to continue the presentation.
Thank you, Maria. Good afternoon, everyone. The evolutions affecting connectivity. Can we go to next slide, please? Thank you. The evolutions affecting connectivity, Maria just outlined by Maria, bring about challenges for business models and for regulatory approaches. Let's start with the impact for telcos and business models. Since virtual worlds and Web4 services represent a structural shift in how networks are used and monetized, they create several opportunities for telco. For example, enabling advanced connectivity through premium quality of service and network slicing, providing network as a service via APIs exposure, leveraging edge computing and sensing networks, and enhancing internal efficiencies through network digital twins, for instance. However, these opportunities are accompanied by significant uncertainties. Demand timing, willingness to pay, viable business models, and return on investment remain unclear. At the same time, the ecosystem is characterized by strong platform dynamics and asymmetric bargaining power. There is a risk of platform concentration and value capture outside the telecom layer. Please, next slide. Thank you. Of course, new prospective market scenario brings about also regulatory challenges. Fostering investment remains central. Hence, regulatory predictability, including co-investment, infrastructure sharing, and ex-ante tools, is key to supporting network upgrades. Openness is equally critical. The Open Internet regulation remains the backbone for non-discrimination. Network differentiation must not undermine Internet access service. At ecosystem level, interoperability and portability are essential to avoid lock-in and preserve contestability. Digital inclusion also remains a priority. If immersive services become relevant for work, education, public services, gaps in connectivity, in affordability, or skills could translate into inequalities. Spectrum policy, of course, continues to be crucial. Timely and efficient access to suitable spectrum, today 5G and Wi-Fi, tomorrow 6G, is indispensable. And finally, competition concerns linked to platform power are primarily addressed through horizontal instruments, such as the DMA, Digital Markets Act, and DSA, Digital Services Act, while traditional ECN, ECS tools remain central for connectivity markets. Next slide, please. Thank you. Going to conclusions, virtual worlds and Web4 services sit at the intersection of cloudification, artificial intelligence, and advanced connectivity. Scaling up from legacy infrastructures to programmable, distributed, high-performance networks is essential, but it is complex and investment-intensive. We are facing here a multi-layer, multi-stakeholder ecosystem where cooperation and competition coexist. We have a scenario of competition, and where demand and value capture remain uncertain. Virtual worlds can then catalyze innovation and value creation, but only if advanced connectivity, openness, and fair competition evolve in step, synchronically. And I would say that's all from my side. Thank you for your attention. The public consultation is open up to the 20th of April. Take a chance to send us your say, your feedback. It's very precious to us. And now floor to colleagues of market and economic analysis, Jordi and Julia.
Can we move to the next slide, please? And still next. Okay, so thank you very much, Katja, and good afternoon to everybody, also from our side. Now it is our pleasure to present you the main results of the BEREC fact-finding report on connectivity, competition, and regulatory highlights in different jurisdictions. Next slide, please. This draft report focuses on the fixed and mobile broadband networks and services, and it indeed includes a comparison between the EU 27 and at times the top 3 EU performers with the situation in other jurisdictions. And to the minimum, based on data reliability, we always compare the EU 27 with the USA and a country from Asia. Now, in making the choices, we have checked data from a wide array of jurisdictions, and you can find them listed on this slide. And based on comparability and other aspects, we have made the choice regarding the different indicators that we present in the report. So overall, we look at coverage and take-up of broadband services, both fixed and mobile, tariffs and quality of services provision, as well as financial metrics, which in general reflect a positive outlook for the sector. But we will come to that later on. At the same time, the report puts forward considerations on consolidation trends and implications for the telecommunications sector, as well as regulatory frameworks governing wholesale access and resulting competition. And on the last bullet point here, we present the relevant data sources. And we would like to underline that BEREC has been using publicly available and trustworthy data sources. So if we could go to the next slide. Here we show the main results and conclusions as regards the network's coverage and services take-up. Overall, we look at 6 indicators that you can find listed on the left-hand side of the slide. And those cover both the fixed and the mobile area. So for the fixed network and services, especially for the fiber coverage in the form of FTTP and also the take-up, what we noticed is that the EU27 is ahead of the US, but behind China and Japan. But if we would look at the top EU performers, then these are much closer to the Asian economies. Additionally, in terms of coverage take-up gap, the EU, USA, and Japan seem to be at par, 29 percentage points. When we look at the speed tiers, we notice that the EU has a lower share of subscriptions with speeds of at least 100 megabit per second when compared to China and the USA, but a higher rate of gigabit subscriptions per 100 inhabitants than Korea. Coming now to the mobile networks and services, what we see is comparable 5G coverage in the EU and other jurisdictions, with the last 2 years having been decisive for Europe. And it's also noteworthy that there are 8 member states in the EU that have already reached 100% coverage in 5G. But of course, here we need to mention that we discuss 5G coverage referring to both standalone and non-standalone services. Another indicator that can be deemed useful in providing contextual information on the mobile broadband network's usage relates to the average monthly mobile data traffic per subscription. And there, what we see is comparable monthly averages for the EU, USA, China, and South Korea. Next slide, please. Here we turn to aspects relating to pricing and the quality of services provision. And to reflect on this aspect, we were analyzing comparatively, all in all, 12 indicators. So to reflect pricings, we were looking at 2 speed tiers in terms of fixed, 200 megabit per second and 1 gigabit per second. 2 type of services combinations, also in fixed, standalone fixed internet and 3 play services with TV and also fixed telephony. And 2 consumption baskets for mobile, namely 20 gigabyte and 50 gigabyte. For the quality of services, on the other hand, we consider the average fixed and mobile download and upload speeds, registered through effective measurements, plus the average value for the latency parameter. And what we can say overall is that the EU is consistently the cheapest or second cheapest jurisdiction when compared to the South Korea, Japan, and the USA, with non-negligible differences in pricing, especially to the USA. So for instance, for fixed, the high-speed tier triple play offer in the States was 3.7 times higher than the one in the EU27. Coming now to the quality of services aspects, in the case of both mobile and fixed broadband services, the EU27 performs modestly in terms of download speeds, being really in the lowest quarter, average when considering the upload speeds, and very good in terms of latency. And now I hand over to Jordi to continue our presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Julia. Now, next slide, please. Okay, regarding the urban-rural, we focus on the divide with 2 indicators. On the fixed side, we have broadband download speeds for rural areas and total. And the findings are that the EU27 average is marginally below the OECD average and underperforms the states. However, top OECD performance are precisely EU countries. On the mobile side, in terms of 5G household coverage. In the EU performed similarly to the States and China, and again, the top EU performers outperformed these regions. On consolidation trends, the key point is to clarify that the scaling up isn't necessary, yet it remains fully feasible. On the need, maximizing scale is clearly not the priority for operators when considering mergers, as we see how multinational telcos are withdrawing from some jurisdictions to focus on core markets. Clear recent examples are Vodafone and Telefonica. On the difficulties, we show evidence that cross-border consolidation is possible in Europe. Examples in Italy and Greece. Also relevant is the joint statement of 6 national competition authorities saying that the current merger controls does not prevent cross-border mergers that can benefit Europe. Also, in-country consolidation is happening, and we have recent examples, for example, in Spain. The real problem with in-country mergers is their impact on consumers. Evidence shows that often end up worse off these consumers. For instance, a recent European Commission DG.com report concluded that consolidation in mobile telecom tends to lead to higher prices, while positive effects on investment are uncertain. I'm moving on access regulation. Next slide, please. We explained that in the EU, national regulators operate under the EC scrutiny and BEREC coordination with a harmonized ex-ante regime, imposing remedies on markets with dominant operators and promoting infrastructure competition through wholesale access and the ladder of investment model. This contrasts, for instance, with the state's reliance on pure facilities-based competition with limited wholesale regulation, or China, which is a centralized state control model. Also, interestingly, in the annex, we provide that what we call service diversity, which is essentially an illustration of how many nationwide options can consumers choose from. The conclusion is that in the EU, we generally have more alternatives, especially on fixed broadband. For instance, in the EU, in general, we enjoy from at least 4 national fixed broadband operators, while in the States, over 1/3 of consumers have only one fixed provider or none. Finally, next slide, please. On financial indicators, our assessment is based on reviewing expert evidence, covering 10 indicators, and the conclusion is that European operators are overall financially healthy and they have positive future with expected greater revenues and lower cost. This is because investments will lower operational cost and increased profit margins. Finally, we would like to thank all the drafters that work for this project. And now we want to pass the floor to Chiara and Margherita. Thank you.
Hello, Jordi.
Thank you, Jordi. Thank you, Julia. Now I will give the floor to Chiara and Margherita, who will present us BEREC responses to the European Commission Digital Fitness Check and Digital Omnibus. Chiara and Margherita, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marco. Good afternoon to you all. So we are going to present the BEREC responses to the European Commission's Digital Fitness Check and Digital Omnibus. Next slide, please. Next slide. And the next, please. Thank you. So first, we would like to explain the context of these BEREC responses. On the 19th of November 2025, the European Commission presented its Digital Omnibus proposal aimed at simplifying the existing European digital rules. The European Commission also launched a Digital Fitness Check, that is a public consultation with a view to exploring the interplay among digital regulations and potential gaps in their implementation. As you know, the Data Act is a novel regulatory instrument which horizontally targets a variety of different stakeholders, including both hyperscalings and small national cloud service providers that are mostly being regulated for the very first time by national authorities, which requires European harmonized implementation. The draft Digital Omnibus clarifies the governance under the Data Act, but neither the European Data Innovation Body nor any other European network is given a role for cloud-related provisions that is Chapter 6 on switching between data processing services and some articles of Chapter 8 on interoperability. Next slide, please. On the substance of BEREC responses, we would like to highlight that the Data Act, in its Article 37(4)b, clearly refers that the competent authority responsible for the application and enforcement of Chapter 6 and Article 34 and 35 of Chapter 8 shall have experience in the field of data and electronic communications services. Based on a questionnaire, we know that most of BEREC members are either designated or identified as the competent authorities for the implementation of these provisions. In addition, since 2024, BEREC has already served as a forum to share and discuss detailed work done by NRAs concerning competitive and technical aspects of the Data Act, cloud-related provisions. Moreover, BEREC has been meeting with relevant cloud stakeholders to gather further knowledge and expertise. And now I hand over to Chiara.
Thanks a lot, Margarita. We can go to the next slide, please. So BEREC, in its responses, puts forward some concrete proposals to ensure a consistent enforcement of the Data Act, and these proposals concern essentially Chapter 6 and 8. On Chapter 6 of the Data Act, which concerns switching between data processing services, we propose that BEREC could develop a common interpretation of which services are concerned by the withdrawal of switching charges and which additional services can still be charged for by the provider. We also propose to assist the European Commission in monitoring the reduction and withdrawal of cloud switching charges and to be consulted by the European Commission before they adopt a delegated act to establish a monitoring mechanism. We also propose to provide technical expertise for the development of standards and the adoption of common specifications under Articles 30 and 35 of the Data Act. Next slide, please. So as I said, we also make proposals on Chapter 8 of the Data Act, which concerns interoperability. Here we say that BEREC could publish guidelines on the data egress charges that the providers may impose for in-parallel use, and also serve as a forum for discussion to support the European Commission on the potential specifications that they could apply under Article 35, and also to provide, if needed, input for the development of standardization requests for cloud services. Of course, if BEREC is designated to cooperate on cloud-related provisions, then a coordination mechanism with EDIB will also be needed, of course. Next slide, please. In the responses, you will also find a list of reasons why we think that these proposals are valuable and why we think that BEREC could be, should be to have a mandate for the coordination of the enforcement on cloud-related provisions. So as Margarita was saying before, the Data Act is a novel instrument, and some BEREC members have already carried out detailed work on the markets for cloud services. So we believe that it would be beneficial to create these synergies and a common pool of knowledge, which also avoids duplication of national resources. Moreover, this would also contribute to avoiding a fragmented enforcement of the regulation. It would contribute to a more streamlined and efficient interplay between the Data Act and other EU digital regulatory frameworks, where BEREC also plays a role, for instance, the Digital Networks Act and the Digital Markets Act. It would also ensure an early identification of emerging practices in the cloud markets and regulatory convergence through non-binding tools. And also it would serve as a contact point for stakeholders at the European level for cloud-related provisions. It could be providers, customers of cloud services, but also civil society. And this is all from our side, so I'm giving the floor back to you, Marko.
Thank you, Chiara. Thank you, Margarita. I will now provide you with a short update on some recent activities, as well as the upcoming BEREC events. Next slide, please. As you all know, the European Commission published the Digital Network Act proposal in January this year, which BEREC is now thoroughly analyzing and developing coordinated, in-depth positions, responses, and proposals. This timeline shows the development of BEREC's position on the DNA, which represents one of the most significant areas of work and related activities for BEREC this year. Following the publication in January and stakeholders' engagement in March, work is ongoing forward towards the adoption of the detailed BEREC's position in early June. Next slide, please. BEREC was also represented at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, where it actively participated in the GSMA BEREC Roundtable and held numerous of bilateral meetings with stakeholders. Next slide, please. So BEREC workshop on migration and copper switch off in light of the DNA held on 17 March in a hybrid format. So the day before yesterday was actually focused on the migration and copper switch off in the context of the Digital Network Act. Discussions covered competitions during and after the switch off, end user challenges, and initial views on the DNA proposal, including a presentation by the European Commission. Next slide, please. I would also like to draw your attention to the two upcoming workshops. So the first one will take place on 21st May 2026, and will focus on combating fraud and the collection of information from stakeholders. And the second workshop, planned for Q2 2026, with the exact date to be announced, will address practices ensuring equivalence of access and choice, particularly in relation of accessibility. Next slide, please. So this slide presents the agenda for the stakeholder forum on 31st of March. The morning session will follow the usual meet and greet format, providing stakeholders with the opportunity to engage directly with the co-chairs of BEREC 12 working groups. This is an exercise we highly value, as it helps inform and shape the work program for the following year. The afternoon session will also follow the established format. It will begin with an open exchange with the stakeholders and followed by the two panel discussions. The first is crafting Europe's next digital framework, and the second is when networks sense, connect, and transcend. The panel discussions will be followed by a keynote address from a representative of the European Commission, Henna Virkkunen. After the formal part of the program, we would be delighted to continue the discussions with you during a networking reception. Next slide, please. So before I wrap up, I would like to draw your attention to some upcoming public consultations related to today's session. First, we have a call for input to next year's work program. So the deadline for submission for this is 15 April 2026. Secondly, we have the public consultation on the draft BEREC Retail and Wholesale Roaming Guidelines, for which the deadline for submission is 16 April 2026. Next is draft BEREC report on virtual worlds and Web 4.0, for which the deadline for submission is 20th April 2026. And the draft BEREC finding report on connectivity, competition, and regulatory highlights in different jurisdictions, where the deadline for submission is the 8th of May. So next slide, please. With that, I would like to thank my colleagues for their input today, and we will start with the second Q&A session. So again, we have received one question in advance. Thank you for submitting it. And actually it says, how can we ensure that global supply chain frameworks are properly integrated, implemented, and strengthened during current geopolitical conflicts? What are the regions and the lines of the business likely to suffer most? So let me answer this one. And let me first explain that the supply chain frameworks fall outside the competences of the NRA and the BEREC. As NRAs are not the legislators, and these matters relates to the national policy decisions. NRAs and BEREC rely on the 5G toolbox. A diversified supply chain is less vulnerable to disruptions and can be an effective approach to the strengthening network resilience and security. However, in cases where operators are required to fully replace and remove a specific supplier from their networks before the end of lifetime period, this might have a negative impact on their business operations. I hope I answered this one. And let's go to the questions we received into the chat. So I think we received another one for Alejandra. Let me read it. Thanks a lot for the interaction, Alejandra. We would be really interested to see what would be behind the strategic priority of the BEREC outline work program to contributing to the sustainable, secure, and resilient digital infrastructure. Alejandro, would you like to reflect on this one? Please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you for the question. Thank you, Marco. Well, this priority was already in the BEREC Action Plan 2030, published in 2023. So BEREC has contributed with its expertise on these matters by means of 2 dedicated working groups. And these topics were identified in the BEREC Action Plan, published in, as I said, in 2023. That's why those were included in our last BEREC strategy published in last December 2025. So it's not a new topics and ideas that we have included in our working plan, but it's included already in 2023 and in our last strategy, BEREC strategy, published in last December. But of course, we are open to your suggestion to include any specific work regarding these topics and in the call for input. So we are very happy to listen to your suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandra. I think we have received another one. It is for Market and Economic Analysis Working Group co-chairs, Julia and Jordi, and let me read it. The draft fact-finding report suggests EU telecoms are financially healthy. However, when it comes to the key parameter of market valuation, virtually no EU operator is above, for instance, Saudi Telecom, active almost exclusively in the Middle East, a smaller market. Is this still a sign of a financial health? Please, Julia, Jordi, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Well, we have chosen a set of financial indicators that address the sustainability of operators. And market valuation is a key metric, but for stakeholders. More importantly, financial health goes among others with profitability. And as evidence shows European operators are profitable. If you want some details, we can go on profitability. In terms of capital efficiency, ROCE, and we see that returns have exceeded the cost of capital, WACC, over the past decade. Also profitability in terms of operating efficiency, EBITDA margin, which shows that the European operators have maintained stable margins with a Standard & Poor's forecasting that it will remain at a good level in the coming years. You still want more about financial health, then you can go to cost and see that clearly declining cost trend, that is OPEX trend. And this is because the replacement of copper will likely lead to lower OPEX, and fiber is cheaper network to run. And we can go for investments and the growth indicators. We analyze CapEx to sales in Europe, and the States and European operators recently reached a peak in CapEx. There is less CapEx intensity going forward when deployment on 5G and fiber has occurred. So many indicators showing that operators are sustainable and healthy, financially healthy. No? And also a good indicator is the total CapEx by operator type, which shows that in major European markets, challengers have invested more extensively than traditional incumbents. So not only the big players with capital, which are in the stock market, are important, but others are even more important altogether. So once shown that the operators are financially healthy, maybe what market valuation shows is that Europe gets a good value for money that improves European economy and competitiveness, as telecom services are an input for the whole economy. So with this, we think it shows clearly what the indicators we should truly look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordi. We got an additional question. I think it's for both PFT and MIA working groups. Let me read it first. So the benchmark refers to the reports that have been criticized by the industry, including DigiComp report and the recent blog post by the chief economist. Have you taken this criticism into account? Future needs for 6G and the virtual worlds are uncertain and as stated today. Was this considered in the forward look? Maybe Maria, you could take this one.
Okay, I will take the second part that is more related to the 6G, and then pass the floor to the MIA working group. The response is yes, we are aware of these ongoing debates, and also because already in relation to the deployment of 5G and 5G monetization, and also this comes in addition to that new generation and new investments, and we probably require some debates. So in this regard, we discussed this in chapter 4 about the business opportunities and also the challenges for the telco operators, and we make reference to these debates, and for example, to the recently published 6G manifesto by William Webb. And then back to the MIA working group for the other question.
Okay, thank you, Maria. On the part of, if we have look at the criticism of the industry, of course we have taken into account all the industry thoughts, but I'm afraid only partial part of the industry has criticized this, or other parts of the industry that has applauded these reports, and also the evidence is what is it? We cannot invent them. So we look at it and analyzed by their own merits, and the conclusions are what we can show in the present report. So whatever new inputs you can contribute in the public consultation will be very well received, and of course we will take into account every single contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordi. Thank you, Maria. It seems there are no additional questions in the chat. So I think we have come to the end of today's session. Thank you all for your attention and for joining us today. And I wish you a pleasant rest of the day. Thank you.